welcome to the Absolute Guard podcast. This is an absolute extra, and we're going to be talking about Street Fighter 6 today in a one-on-one chat with KingHippo, aka Tanner.
Hey,
How's it going,
everybody, good to be
Tanner?
back.
What's
Awesome.
up?
Awesome.
So, in the previous panel episode we had with T Dot and Tanner, we talked a lot about Street Fighter 6 and the impressions of the beta, but realistically, there's so much to talk about with the drive gauge and the general system mechanics and the character balance and the intents behind a lot of these different decisions in this game that we decided we wanted to keep talking about it, basically.
There's a lot to talk about. It's something else. It's really something to dig your claws into.
Yeah. So I guess why don't we go ahead and get started here? What's your favorite drive mechanic, Tanner? We'll just see where it takes us.
Well, I definitely think that the drive parry would definitely be, I think,
Parry.
the best thought out mechanic so far. Everybody obviously was really want to talk about the drive rush and especially the oh gosh, I'm already losing what the name is.
Drive impact.
Oh, drive impact. There you go. DI. Everybody, want to talk about that, and I definitely agree. There's a lot about those that are very interesting, but I think kind of unsung has been the drive parry, which I actually think is a really smart mechanic. I think it will add a lot to the game, and in my experience, although it's very limited, I have had a lot of success with it. I guess I would ask because you happen to play as being in the first beta, you got into the second one by default. I only got into the second one, so I was going to ask that you've had a little bit more hands-on experience with me. What has been your experience using like drive parry or trying to mess with how it works and things of that nature?
Yeah. So some ground level information about it. Drive parry is a button that you can hold, and you will enter essentially a blocking stance, and you'll absorb any attack and get the associated drive meter back from absorbing those attacks. If you hit the button at the right time, specifically, it's a 1 to 2 frame window. It's a 2 frame window, if I recall correctly.
Yeah,
so the moment
frame,
you press it, and if that parry stance collides with an active hitbox on frame one or 2, you'll get a perfect parry animation.
Big slowdown, guaranteed combo on most things.
Yeah, and I think that what was cool about learning to use it over the course of the 2 betas was that it was hard to mess it up. And that's by design because of the hold mechanic behind it, where if I hit the parry too early, then my perfect parry doesn't come out and I just immediately go into the absorb animation. And so the risk of going for it is significantly smaller. Like you don't have to worry about messing it up, like a wake up DP or something like that, or a wake up button and doing it at the exact timing. You could theoretically forego the perfect parry altogether, and just the moment your character hits the ground, hold the parry button. And so by default, as a new player in the first beta, I just didn't really know. Like that just was too foreign to me. So I didn't use it as much until closer to the end of the first beta. And there, it still was too hard to really go through and try it for perfect parry because the timing varied depending on the player. More specifically, you can't practice a defensive mechanic against people that don't have offensive capabilities yet.
That don't even know what's happening.
Right. Yeah. And so my experience in the second beta is I got way more mileage out of it because at that point people had figured out how to do meaties, and I think that's going to be the primary application for a perfect parry in normal play. Is that if you get knocked down and somebody comes at you and then goes for a meaty by definition hits you on frame 1 of your wake up, and so theoretically the timing for getting a perfect parry is universal. So you basically, if you guess that they're going to go for a meaty, you go for the parry. And it should happen way more often than guessing a parry in neutral, if that makes sense.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that, like you said, it's hard to mess up. And just for the record, you keep referring to it as a button, which is true. Parry technically is both medium punches and kick, I think. Correct, held together. But you can bind it to a single button, which in my opinion, if you play on a gamepad, you're going to have a pretty nifty advantage. Cause like I like to use a snack box. I have the snack box micro. And while I like using it, my pinky, I'm not dexterous enough to like reach over and tap my pinky for a single button. I'd probably use both, but really that's quite the advantage to have a frame one parry that guards everything but throws. So high lows, all that stuff. And you can just tap it. And, I think it's one of those things that like it's a great mechanic for. We talk about this a lot because shocker. My opinion is that a lot of people like fighting games, but are very bad at talking about why they like them or really kind of breaking it down. But one of the things that is really hard to explain without like a visual reference is like the rhythm of fighting games. Now, you and I are both veterans at this point. We kind of know. So I'll put you an example just so. And I'm sure anyone who's listening who's been playing could understand this. Like, let's say you're playing as Ryu, you do a jump in hard kick, you do stand medium punch, you're at plus frames, but instead of pressing that, you walk back a little bit, and then you immediately hit crouching medium kick. Now, what you're doing is you're walking backwards so as to invite someone to walk forward or press something in, maybe thinking there's going to be a throw coming, and the crouching medium kick hits them out of that, and you go into move, right? That's a simple rhythm. It's like a spacing trick almost that you do. Just it works on a lot of people. Now, what the parry's going to do is if you feel that's coming, but you don't know how to stop it, you can always hit left trigger or whatever it might be bound for you. And that will interrupt that. And no matter what they do, as long as they don't go for a throw, you're not gonna get hit. You're going to be able to make a read while still being relatively safe. Find out what they do, find out their rhythm, and then use that, turn it against them. And I think it's just a really smart way because, as you said before, parry in most games is like a tap forward motion at the last second, which is good, I think, for advanced players. It definitely gives them something to chew over. But as we talked about when I was on the panel show, very prone to like use of like option selects and buffering it into moves and things like that make it. And it's also not a visible thing. So if you're a new player, you really don't know what's going on. It's really hard to look at matches like, say, Street Fighter 3 and understand that there's actually a lot of some of those parries you see aren't just galaxy brain mind reads. They're actually, they kind of dialed that into their move and are kind of expecting it. And, so it is just a really, in my opinion, like as if you're a new player and you start to understand how people like to bait out attacks and kind of preemptively throw out these moves, you can do a left trigger parry and see, oh, this is what they do. Oh, they didn't do it. Okay, we're back off. We're back to just normal. Because like I said, unless they throw you or they have a way to throw you, you're not going to get punished for it because you can block during the recovery of it, even though there is like a little bit of recovery time before you can get back to moving. But it's those kind of things I think are really important in understanding, helping a person develop what we would call fighting game fundamentals, which is kind of a woo term, but it's something. I mean, it's a tangible thing. It's hard to explain and it's even harder to show, but I think a parry mechanic will help do that for new players.
I think so. Like we think a lot about why fighting games are popular. We, in our case as players, we like playing the read based game and trying to read our opponents. And part of the reading is figuring out timing. Right. But I also think a lot about casual players and how they first get into fighting games. And I think it's a significant subset of the fighting game community got into fighting games because of Evo Movement 37. And so what ends up happening is you see like the best of the best parrying all of Chun-Li's SA2, and you as a player are like, I want to do that. And then you actually play the game in Third Strike with the parries being all option selects and it being really like precise and hard. And if you mess up, you eat the whole super. Like it's hard. And so it made it really difficult for people to like want to get into fighting games because in my opinion, it's like I want to do the cool thing that I saw somebody else do. And I can't because the execution barrier is too high. And this parry, the implementation for parry in 6 solves that problem by making it a hold button and makes it easier, right? By the same token, a lot of the problems for the hardcore players with 3 was that there wasn't any penalty for doing parry because you could OS it, like you said, where you'd get into this OS trap, right? And It's analogous to throws in a lot of ways where, you know, one button throws in previous games, you wouldn't get a throw whiff animation, you get a heavy animation or something, right? A fierce button would come out, and then or a strong in Street Fighter 2. And so you never really got like a clear idea or visual feedback from what your character is doing or what your opponent's doing. And in this instance here, by adding essentially what is a recovery period to a parry rather than making it be forward, you are providing information to both players to allow them to have that conversation and have that read-based mental model better. And I think that's it's something as simple as just adding a parry whiff animation in the same way that adding a throw whiff animation changed a lot of Street Fighter. I feel like this implementation doesn't make it option select per se, but it pulls back the curtain on a lot of the cool parts about parry that somebody watching Evo Moment 37 will then be able to see and appreciate. And I really like that. To get even into the nitty gritty about parry, you are correct in that situation where the Ryu jumps in and then they do like a delayed string and walk backwards and parry, you could theoretically fight your way out of that by just holding the button down. The other side of it is that the tap parry is a real thing where if you tap it, you can actually, like, there's a recovery period on the parry, but that recovery period is cancelable into a block. Mm-hmm. And so you can actually recover in time to tech a throw. If you choose to hold it instead and kind of hedge your bets and be like, I'm going to cover all these options or whatever, by holding it, you are essentially leaving yourself more open to a throw. So you can do things like tap parry, release it really quickly so you don't incur too much of a penalty so you can still tech a throw afterwards. But then that also makes it so someone will be like, well, I just saw this guy parry, I'm going to walk backwards and shimmy. So that way when they try to tech a throw after tapping parry, you know, there's a whole another layer to that mind game now, just based all on the recovery period of that parry.
Exactly. Yeah. And then there's another complicated layer, which I'll hold off on for a little bit, but you can drive rush. You hold a parry, double tap forward, and now you're drive rushing. Right.
Yeah.
And that is a powerful move. And when you do it from a parry, it doesn't cost as much. Mm-hmm. So as far as drive meter, you know, it's half for the parry, half for the drive rush. So it takes about 1.
Yeah.
So that's something to think about too, is that even if you whiff a parry, you can then, if you think, well, I'm kind of in a bad situation, I can drive rush. And that most of the time will be you running in with a big move to get some frame advantage that you're pretty much going to be guaranteed to get. And then you can build your offense from there. It's just a really well layered. I like the way you framed it as like a conversation, like it's an information gathering thing that you can do that will help you figure out what. And it's a hard rule too. Like it's no matter, as long as you get it out and you hold it, you're going to block everything.
Right.
I think that sometimes there needs to be moves like that. I always, you know, I'm not a huge player of it, but I always very much greatly respect Virtua Fighter because I think as simplistic as it is, it's very, very deep. And the reason for that is because there are hard and fast rules that always matter. One of them is, for example, that a punch or a strike will always be a throw. There is no well, technically it's on like the 5th frame. It's like, no, for the first frame, if you're in an attack animation, you will beat somebody throwing you. So that is the direct counter to it. So in this case, it's like, okay, what's the direct counter to, like you said, a meaty or someone jumping in on me as I'm getting up for doing like a safe jump? I can parry it. And that at least gets me the time. I don't have to worry about what side are they going to land on. Is it going to be an overhead or a low? I can at least do this move. It's going to give me some breathing room to think, okay, what am I going to do next? Are they going to throw? Do I want to do that? Do I want to keep holding parry because I think they're going to do another move? Already you can see the multiple layers of mind games that could apply between two talented players. And then just if it's a simple player, they're going to parry the first one, and you could probably throw them afterwards, and they won't even know that they can throw tech. So it's like you can definitely take advantage of someone not knowing, while at the same time, it's the same animation will provide layers of depth for more experienced players.
Yep.
And I think that that's why I like the drive parry so much. I think it's going to open the window. Another common tactic that if you play fighting games a lot, you know, is that people, for obvious reasons, will like to try to cross you up when you're in the corner, they like to jump out and do a cross up. It's just it's natural, right? That's what you want to do.
Yeah.
Well, now that you have the drive parry, and it's actually not too bad because most people, when you're doing like a cross up, you're going to hit it like the exact same part most of the time. You got to wait a little bit. During the beta, I got a lot of perfect parries on a cross up out of the corner. Someone just trying to jump out, and I couldn't quite react with the Dragon Punch yet. I haven't really got the execution for it, but I can perfect parry because I know they're going to do it, and I can throw them back into the corner, and I get a punish counter because it's a throw on a whiff recovery from a jump attack, and they lose the bar, and they're back in the corner. So I have better answers to commonly kind of annoying tactics that are sometimes difficult to really react to, but you just one button.
I didn't think about that. Yeah, like you can consider it a budget anti-air.
A budget, yeah.
But even then, it's not necessarily budget because it's not objectively worse. It kind of reminds me of like Dragon Ball, the auto combo system, where that was made for beginners. The parry system isn't actually made for beginners, but bear with me on that. It's a tool that's made for beginners, but it's still used in high level play. It has a practical application for it, and that you can use it as your combo starters. The parry, it's got just enough reward where it doesn't become obsolete as you level up. It's still relevant for the entirety of your skill climb, I think.
Yeah, it's not just a crutch.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think
still
sometimes
worth going for that to side switch sometimes, like you said, in that position where they jump over you, they crossed you up in the corner, and you want to throw them back in there. Like it's worth going for parry than or over a crosscut DP.
Yeah, for sure. Or I had a video on Twitter. I might retweet it again just so people could see it. But I was fighting a jury, and twice in the match she would do the dive kick just willy nilly, and I would just wait at the last box second. I'd tap the parry, and I'd got a perfect parry. So it was just like a random dive kick or whatever. If it's slow enough, I could just kind of tap parry. And odds are, hell, if I get the perfect parry, great. If I get a regular parry, at least I got my frames back and I didn't get pushed back as much. So it's really kind of a win-win. I kind of compared it to, in Mortal Kombat 11, they have Flawless Block, which is their version of sort of a parry or a perfect parry where you have to hold block in that game, obviously. And if you get it within a 3-frame window, you get into a position called Flawless Block, in which you can now do either an invulnerable kind of uppercut attack that gets them off of you, or you can launch them. And what that did in that game, really what it ended up doing was that a lot of people don't like in Mortal Kombat, which has more of like a 3D fighter-ish frame data. Actually, not too dissimilar to Street Fighter 6. A lot of stuff is negative. Okay. And a lot of it hits, the fastest stuff hits high. So a lot of players, what they'll do is they will mash like a ducking attack, which doesn't lead to much, but it's really annoying. Just someone's machine gunning just these pokes at you. So what you can do is, like, a lot of times what they'll, some players do is they'll get into negative frames and then they'll just tap block real quick. And a lot of times if you are machine gunning or trying to do it as fast as possible, you'll get flawless blocked and they'll get launched. And so if you watch high level MK11, that happens all the time.
Okay.
It's that rhythm that we talked about, that information that people pick up, they understand now, and now they can counter it. And I think Perfect Parry will probably do something similar where I've even had it done sometimes. I did it on accident where, like, I was fighting a Jamie, and Jamie did like 2 jabs, walked up, walked back, did crouching medium kick and a record. Totally common, like, oh, I'm just going to catch you just trying to walk backwards. What I did was I blocked the crouch medium kick and I perfect parried the Rekka.
Oh, the Rekka. Okay.
Yes, so because there is a small gap. Yeah, there's a small gap, but my guess is you'd have to do an EX uppercut or something, which is kind of expensive. I don't really want to do that. But if I could parry it, I don't get pushed back as much, or I get the perfect parry and I get at least something to take advantage of, swing the momentum back my way. So I think there's going to be a lot of those situations where there's like these little tiny gaps that normally, a character with like a reversal might be able to get through. But now you can at least sneak a parry in because it's only one frame, or the startup is the first frame. You can sneak in through gaps to take advantage of that. And sometimes you might get that perfect parry, or at least just a parry at all. You're going to get drive meter back for getting it. There's a tangible reward just for doing it. Obviously with fireballs, and because if you block moves, you lose drive meter.
Right. It's objectively better to parry if you can, because you can get the drive meter that you would have lost from blocking something.
Exactly. For the fireball is a great example. You see a lot of people, when I see a lot of footage, you see a lot of people get hit. It looks like they walked into a fireball, and I could tell what they were trying to do was hit both buttons to do parry.
Yeah.
They were just missing the timing. But you can perfect parry a fireball, and there is no huge animation, but you get the same like instant recovery too. So that's something too. You could perfect parry a fireball and just keep walking forward at an even faster pace. And it's just that's definitely my favorite mechanic. I think it's gone slept on a little bit just because, like you said, it's when you don't know anything, it's kind of tough to really take advantage of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when we get to a high level, you're going to see, tactics that like I've seen you do this a lot, and I think it's a really good idea. It's like drive rush forward with Chun-Li and do her down forward hard kick, and she flips into the air, and you got no idea where she's going. But right. I would imagine if I was a little bit sharper, I might have just said, well, hell, I'm going to parry that.
Yep.
And I don't even know what side it's going to land on, but I
doesn't matter, right?
It doesn't matter, right? And even if she is at frame advantage because she used it in drivers, I don't know if she is. That's better than just me. Okay, I'm going to guess on which side it is, and hopefully I'm right, because otherwise I'm going to eat a lot of damage.
Yeah.
Situations like that, it's just you have a counter.
I
that's the great thing about fighting games.
Yeah, so in some ways it distills the game plan to strike, throw, block, right? But I think that so with 5, it felt like they were trying to please everybody and trying to keep everything balanced, right? And we've talked at length about how that, whether or not they succeeded or failed in that endeavor.
Definitely up for debate.
Yeah. For this game, with the parry system in particular, like it feels like they committed to a vision in wanting this parry, and I could see people not liking 6 because of this parry, because there are people out there, a lot of times they're anime players, a lot of times they're Marvel players, they really like the mix. They like left-right. Like there are characters in Street Fighter that are designed around left-right mix-ups. Viper was like that. Ibuki was like that. I played like that for a long time. I loved left-right. I liked making my blocks ambiguous. But also from a player standpoint, like when you're on the receiving end of it, it sucks. It's not fun blocking cross-up and guessing, essentially, and you don't feel like you got outplayed all the time. But I think there are a subset of players that are going to be like, my left-right high-low game is completely trivialized by this parry mechanic, and so I don't really want to play the game anymore. I think that could be a potential drawback to this game. I personally really like it right now, but again, it changes defense so much and removes a lot of basic Street Fighter fundamentals like cross-ups from the game. Now it has to be applied. The parry actually has to be applied to those cross-ups, but I could see people in the long term when parries are much more common being like, no, I wanted to do my high-low game, but now I can't. Now I have to mix and throw,
Yeah. I could see that. Now I like to think of it more as like taking away, I think that's too much. So what I usually like to think of, so I don't like this as much in Street Fighter 3, but now that I understand it more because I had someone explain it to me how it works, I can respect it. It's like the idea that parry in Street Fighter 3, because you can do it in the air, means that it's hard to anti-air people.
Right.
And a lot of players who play it will say, well, kind of. It can make it hard to anti-air. But for the most part, a lot of people aren't like, air parry is something that you have to do it first to get people to respect. And it is a read to do it, to do like an empty jump parry. Will people do it? Absolutely. But so like with cross-ups is the same thing. Yes, sometimes you're going to cross up the first time, you're going to get perfect parried. You're going to feel like an idiot. Mm-hmm. But as long as you still know, okay, sometimes if I just empty jump, they're going to parry and I'm going to throw them and it's going to hurt. There is still counterplay. And as long as there's counterplay, I think you're going to see those options still exist, because in order to overload someone's mental stack, you have to be able to do all those things. Even if there's an option to counter it, not everyone's Doctor Strange and they're looking and seeing the million different things at all time. Even though at times it feels like that. Like when I played Killer Instinct, I remember sometimes people would combo break me and I'd be like, dude, I can't, like 3 times in a row. And I'd be like, dude, I can't. Like this is so like, how are they seeing so far in the future? It's not that. It's just that there's just it's like gambling.
Instinct.
It's just there is a chance that you can do it, and why not go for it? And if you do, great. If you don't, you can learn better for later. And so I think as long as there's not, I would say high-low too, because they've added drive rush in and overheads now, instead of like Street Fighter 5 where they're just these pissy little moves that didn't really do anything and they were really unsafe. Now it's like, not only are they all mostly safe, but drive rush them, and now
you get combo into Oki.
Yeah, and most characters could do it from their crouch medium kick. They might be able to at least land a light. Maybe not the greatest option, but there is a high-low that they can do. And while realistically you could, I see the drive rush, I'm going to parry. What if they just drive rush into throw?
Yep. I think that's fair.
So it's like, even though like taking away is like certainly definitely like, I think the autopilot, like I think the stuff like I'm thinking of like Ibuki in Street Fighter 4. She does neck breaker.
Yep.
She does one timing and then she
left,
throws
right.
kunai.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. You would be able to parry the kunai and it wouldn't. Okay. Now we're just back to playing again. Right now, what if in theory, it's like she could either cross up or do the kunai. And so if she crossed up and I did the parry and I didn't hold it, well, now I'm blocking a cross up that I don't know where it's going. Like there's still
it's still there. Play there. I see what you're saying.
Just like when delayed wake up got added in, right? Like that was the whole idea was like, well, if you delay get up now, she can't do it. It's like, well, maybe initially, but people are going to figure something out, to get around that. So I just think it's the kind of thing that it's simple enough that players can like, okay, and the training mode is robust enough to where you can run this setup and go like, well, how many ways can I get around this? Which is what you want. Whereas in Street Fighter 5, I felt like there were a lot of situations or even in Street Fighter 4, there's a lot of situations that are more or less, well, tough shit. Like it's Akuma sweeps you. He's going to do the demon flip. I'm sorry. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like and if he lands and he does the palm, he's going to sweep you again. Like I'm sorry. There is no way.
There's no counterplay, right?
Yeah. Neck breaker. She's going to do the kunai. I'm sorry. You can't focus attack out. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
Because that was always the problem I had was like, well, you can't even focus out. Because that's what focus is supposed to do, right? Like focus was like, okay, I'm going to absorb a hit and backdash. And it's like, well, what if they could also sweep the backdash? So you can't really get out.
Yeah, there were some characters there were some characters that could focus out of that stuff, but that's the problem is that it's like hyper specific matchup character dependent ways out of this thing versus a universal option of strike, throw, and block. And I hear your point on there, and that like, yeah, it's not that it's trivialized completely. It's still there. It's just now that like if I wanted to play a high-low game, I better make sure that there's a throw option in there.
Yes,
if I play a left-right game,
exactly it.
I got to make sure there's a throw option there.
Which is why Mortal Kombat, I think the flawless block makes a ton of sense, because in Mortal Kombat you can't take a throw while you're blocking. And normally throws are highs, but if you're blocking and crouching, you get thrown. And throws do 14%. They're usually very, very good. So, and sometimes they have like an additional like crushing blow version where either you get launched for a combo or it does like 35%. So throws are really, really strong in Mortal Kombat 11. A lot of people complain about it, but I always tell people like they have to be, because otherwise you would never let go of block. If you can just throw me and I'm full screen again and there's no Oki or whatever, I don't care if you throw me. But in Street Fighter 5 and 6 now, you can see like Ryu, just as an example, his forward throw, even if you back roll, he could, if as long as he understands that you're back rolling, he does one dash. My guess is he's still in attack range or could just walk up and throw pretty easily.
Yep.
It's not like Street Fighter 5 where a lot of characters got the forward throw and then you could just back recovery and it's like, well, okay,
yeah. I from a game design standpoint too, I find the parry option to be a really elegant solution, because we talked a lot about how it essentially simplifies the game. It doesn't remove the depth, because the depth is based on the player to player interaction, but it simplifies it down to strike, throw, and block. And that's frankly, like, that's good enough for me as far as like a fighting game player to player interaction. But when a beginner is picking that up, like I'm talking like new to an arcade stick period, nobody ever fucking blocks, right? They always they're hitting buttons, they're mashing, they're playing as active as possible.
More likely,
yeah. And so if you're striking, that makes sense. If you're throwing, that also makes sense, because throwing is an option, is a 2-button active attack, right? Blocking is a passive thing. You're using your left hand, you're using the other hand entirely, you're holding backwards, and you're just kind of letting it happen. By adding a parry button, it makes your right hand and the player, like the beginner player in this case, they have to knowingly choose to do something to press that button. It then completes that rock, paper, scissors triangle in my mind. I think that 100%. Because block was always so passive, people always leaned on strike and throw, and they were mashing, and then they would, because everyone's seen their little brother or their girlfriend or their boyfriend or whoever play, and they just start mashing, and eventually they figure out how to mash throw, so they'll mash throw instead. But no one ever mashes block. but now they can.
Yeah. Basically, yeah. So back to the Virtua Fighter example, they call that Nitaku.
Nitaku?
It's like two forced alternate choice or something like that. That's a fancy name for it. But basically what they're saying
Okay.
is strike throw, but it's their way of saying like, well, you can block, which is if you hold guard, and if you hold forward and guard, that's throw. But throw will always lose to punch or kick. And this will always lose to that. Like if you look at Virtua Fighter, you can see there's a lot of situations that they have accounted for. Like, for example, I saw one, it was crazy. Like, no wake up, get up kick will win on this frame. It will always lose to this one thing.
Oh.
So it's like you get people who learn the timing well enough to where it's like, I can't even do that. It's a hard rule. So I have to learn how to play around it. I think sometimes you need those. And I know some people feel it's limiting, but I think sometimes you need those hard rules because otherwise, if you can't even get the base game established, I think that's when people come in and feel like, well, what the hell's happening? Like, I don't even know what happened. I just died. And so when you have this rule, well, parry, left trigger stops all this.
Yep.
If you don't want to block, that's fine. You can hit left trigger. It'll block for you. There are some risks to it, but you can do it. I think that is way better than like just throwing them in there with the sharks and just someone gets eaten up, and has no way of like, I can't even defend against this. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, because oftentimes it's like my character isn't doing the thing that I want them to do, right? And then if you hit the parry button, the character goes into that stance, they turn blue. It's a lot of visual feedback for both you and for your opponent. So you feel like I think it feels like this game just in general feels all about providing agency to the player and letting the players talk to each other as opposed to talking through the game.
Right, which I think most people, you hear the term like the player expression used a lot. And I think it can be kind of an esoteric term. Yeah. I know it's so vague, but like sometimes it's like you really have to like that kind of thing matters a lot. And I think whereas when I talk about Street Fighter V, I feel like it was only a couple mechanics. If they were changed, I think the game would open up entirely. But I feel like the priority system and like the way that you always had to account for back tech and front tech at all times, it made you like, okay, I have to like auto do this stuff. If I'm playing Cammy, I'm always going to do crouch medium punch, stand medium punch. Like there is really no reason for me to do anything other than that. And then occasionally walk up throw. It's just I will beat, and to defend against that, I can't throw a jab out between the two medium punches because I'll lose just naturally. Like there is no chance. Whereas like that's an example of a hard rule that I feel like I don't know if that's as good because like if it beats one option, fine, but it's like I'd have to backdash. Like I think you mentioned you could backdash, I guess, but that's not really doing much. You're losing ground sometimes.
Yeah, you're losing ground. You're taking a hit, which is also not an intuitive thing for a player to want to do. Is take
a hit,
right?
To get out of a block string that is like super basic, like costs no effort, but there is really no way to escape it. So you can see, like the first thing even I noticed when I played Evo Street Fighter 6 for the first time was like, wow, I'm trading all the time.
Yeah.
That was the first thing that stuck out to me. Like, wow, this trade's happening all over the place. And it's because, there's no priority system. So now you see sometimes people hit like a fierce button and you hit it with your jab and you trade it with it. And some people win the trade. Some people lose the trade. I think that's great. I'm glad to see that back. And now with the wake up too, it's like now it's the same timing no matter what. But sometimes you flee backwards. So you do have to walk up and reestablish. But for the most part, everybody gets... Oh, you threw? It's the same timing. If you look at the training mode counter, it's the same timing. It's just now they go backwards.
Yep.
So it's a guess, but it's not a guess where it's like, okay, now they're going to wake up jab me and I'm dead. Or I've lost the momentum because I misread the dashing, which never felt great in my opinion.
Yeah, it kind of comes down to like how much the game limits you or takes away from your decisions. Like if you do something and the game doesn't respond in kind, or like for example, like if I hit a medium button and you hit a heavy button and they collide on the same frame, my expectation is that my medium button still comes out, and then we get the trade. But with the priority system with 5, my medium button wouldn't even come out at all. I would just lose, right?
Right.
And so it's all about how much agency does the game take away from you from doing the thing that you wanted to do, and that decides like how fun it is in my mind. And I think that like the priority system is a good example. The parry system is another example where, again, you glow blue, so like you see it come out. Everything that you do that you want to do and the buttons that you press, they come out, and you get to see them come out, and then you get to see if you ride or die by that.
Yes.
But in 5, it was like, or to some extent in 4, it's like, well, I'm hitting them and they're building up a meter for getting hit, and I can't control that. I don't get to decide to just not hit them, because the goal of the game is to reduce their life down to 0. So by playing the game, I'm being punished for it. And marrying that with the comeback mechanic is really hard. And like in general, like like for V Trigger is a good example where it's like, I might die by playing the game as intended.
Right. Right. They swung me when they were at like less than half life, and once, and it was like, oh hell.
Right. And so that shitty feeling stems from, I don't have control over this gauge. This V trigger bar is going to build up, and I can't do anything about it. But with your drive meter, your opponent's drive meter, you feel like you have some agency there. It's based on your decisions. If the swing comeback happens because you burned all your drive, you can look back on it and be like, I did that. And then that keeps the game gets out of the way. Basically, right. You have a conversation with your opponent, and the game isn't throwing artificial limits at you. It still has those rules, like in Virtua Fighter that you mentioned, that are consistent, but you don't feel like you're fighting the rules. You feel like you're fighting within the rules against your opponent.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the one thing. Like, so there's still like critical arts, right? Like that.
Yeah, there's still comeback.
It's a level 3, and it's like does a huge load of damage or whatever. But that's usually going to come in round 2. It's probably not going to happen every game. Mm-hmm. And even like the level 1 super, like I was critical of this when I first talked about it, but the more I've thought about it, the more I kind of like it, is how tiered off the super system is.
Yeah.
So it's like in this game, you got level 1, which is pretty much solely an invulnerable reversal, or
it's defensive, right?
A defensive mostly. You can technically cancel it into normals, but a lot of times that's usually just to sneak some damage, or like Guile probably takes the most advantage out of it. You see a ton of people will cancel in a Sonic Hurricane out of a target combo just to sneak some damage in.
Yeah, and you get spacing advantage too, right? It knocks them away because everyone's back-teching by default out of the gate.
And a lot of times he can do the upwards Sonic Hurricane into EX flash kick. Now they're full screen.
Yeah, I remember that.
His Guile is the best, right? So that for him, there's an example of that. But for the most part, most people, it's like this is your last chance against like when you're in burnout and you can't defend against like a drive impact coming your way. You at least have the level 1 super,
right,
to get out. It does a little bit of damage, and even when like if you do it in combos, it's usually not worth it. Level 2 is where it's like, okay, either a more damaging ender that I can use, I can cancel into from EX special moves because I can't do that with the level 1.
Right.
Or it's an install super for some characters, which just makes total sense, right? Like that it's like a V trigger. You get way better. Everybody has a 2-bar V trigger now, which I think is much better. No one likes the 3-bar V trigger.
And then you also tie character expression into that too, because each of the level 2s are different. By and large, for level 1s, all the level 1s are just straight up invincible reversals for every character.
Yeah, the move might be different, but for the most part, it does one job. And
yeah, even when we were looking at the new characters, I think like Geef had an invulnerable level 1. Cammy had, I think. Actually, I don't remember.
We didn't really see the super so much, but my guess is it would be. Now there are some that are interesting, like Luke, for example. His is a tremendous anti-air and anti-fireball move.
His level 1.
Yeah, where he shoots he basically does the V trigger one. Yeah, that's like a really solid move, and it juts you full screen too.
Yes.
Like no matter what, you get knocked to full screen. So there are some instances, and I've seen it too, where he could do like his jab target combo into EX, rising uppercut, and then do super, and that will knock you full screen where he's got a very good fireball. So there's definitely ways to use it. And then the level 3 for most characters is just like a huge, great combo ender. It definitely unlocks a huge amount of damage for every character. And most characters can now actually land theirs in a combo. It's not like, well, there's some characters where they do a super and they can't really, they're level 3. They can't really use it other than. Now, obviously, we have like Geef and something like that who may have a grab super.
Right.
That will obviously have to be used a different way. But that's the variety thing, right? Like that's what you want.
Yeah.
So I think it's great that the system is tiered off to where it's like there's not like, oh, well, we're just going to do. Like, I think for a lot of characters, it's like I do want to hold on to that level 3. Like I understand the reasoning for it. At the same time, there are reasons where you may feel like, well, hey, I got to use my level 1 here. I don't have a choice,
Yeah, the way I group the 3 tiers is like defensive for level 1, utility for level 2, and then comeback for
Damage.
level
Yeah.
3.
Comeback.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I say comeback because the damage is there. So the way the scaling works is that there's a minimum scaling on level 1s where it minimizes at 10%, which is still pretty low. So if you attack a level 1 at the end of the combo, it's not going to be doing much more than even an OD move.
Yeah, exactly. It's usually not worth it.
Level 2, I believe, caps at 30%. So it's a little bit more, but you still kind of feel, you start to feel the damage nerf after you got a long enough combo. But level 3 caps at 50%, and that's
Right.
why like you can get a perfect parry, right, and then eat all the extra scaling with perfect parry. We didn't even talk about scaling on perfect parry, by the way.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it drops it down to like max scaling right away.
Yeah.
But if you hit them with the level 3, you still make that perfect parry hurt.
Yeah, for sure.
The other thing that's really noticeable about the level 3s in the beta is that when I played it last December, like it was every level 3 I got hit by did not provide Oki. It was only ever like, with the exception of Jamie. Jamie's the only exception, and Ken. Like there are a couple like weird characters where they could choose to not combo the level 3 entirely. Like Ken, you could choose to forego the cinematic and then just get double DP at the end, right?
And Jamie, between his critical art and his regular level 3, like he can combo off the regular level 3. The critical art is just a full animation. There's no combo afterward.
What they do though is that you inherently take a damage nerf. Jamie notwithstanding, Jamie is a weird case, but in favor of getting Oki. So the level 3s provide that versatility and flexibility to choose damage over a setup over damage, essentially Oki over damage. But what was my point? Oh, the big point there is that early in the game's lifespan, I think level 3s are more important because also they do a drive recovery aspect as well.
Yeah.
So let me try to think about how to describe this. So we haven't talked about drive rush at all, right? But if you do a drive rush cancel, there is a penalty for your drive recovery. You don't, if you were to do, for example, like a forward strong, like a Chun-Li forward strong drive rush cancel into button into super art 2, your drive would not recover during the entirety of that super art 2. You pay basically a drive recovery penalty. And that penalty is a time-based penalty, and it doesn't let up until the combo ends. So if I'm playing Chun-Li and I'm doing super art 2 and I do it off of a drive rush cancel, I do my juggle afterwards, not building drive bar during that entire thing. For level 3, however, if I do forward strong drive rush cancel and combo into level 3, level 3s ignore that penalty, and so
it starts during the cinematic. Yeah,
right. Yeah. So like the cinematic burns out the time it would take for the it burns out is the wrong phrase to put it, but it gives you enough time for that drive bar to start building again. Essentially, you don't incur the penalty from a drive rush.
Yeah, which I know if you look a lot of footage, you see that exactly happens. And while you don't incur a penalty, you take it from your opponent, because I think the higher up you go, the more drive rush that a super will take from the opponent. Like I think a level 3 one, I think takes 2.
Yeah,
maybe 1.5.
I think it's 1.5, and then for CA, if you're in critical art
CA
range,
does 2. Okay,
it takes 2. I think so.
Okay. Yeah, so that means sometimes people I see, to put people in burnout on purpose, they will do a level 3 kind of early, and you're like, well, why'd they do that? And it's like, well, they put them in burnout.
Yeah,
and of course you want someone in burnout. Like that's the ultimate position you want to be in.
Sometimes it's not even just burnout. It's like, hey, I want to get a drive lead, because the drive gauge will dictate who's attacking, who's defending a lot of times. And so if say I have a drive deficit, I'll give up the Oki and combo into level 3 so that way I can get my drive back, so I have more defensive mechanics if they decide to keep trying to burn me out,
because then you have enough drive to be like, well, the next combo, I might have stopped it early to get like 35% with the level 3, but now I can do like maybe another 45 right after that.
Yeah.
And it's like, now we're in territory where it's like a couple hits will end it. And I think for all the talk we've done about how defensive a lot of this stuff is, rounds can end really fast.
Yeah, damage is high.
Um,
Damage is
Damage
high
is
in this
high.
game.
Damage is high. Yeah, and you'll definitely notice, especially like you play against like a character like Jury, and you're thinking like, well, she's just gonna like poke me. She's not gonna do a lot of damage. Au contraire, she will do a ton of damage, actually, really fast. And you're like, what happened to my whole life? It's just gone.
Yeah.
And I think that's you know, a lot of people argue over whether or not high damage is good, and I think it obviously, like everything, it's more nuanced than that. It's contextual, but I think in a game like this where it's accessible to most of the characters, I do think it's fine to let that damage fly because it's expensive, and a big part of the game is like, do you go into burnout to try to secure an early lead and then just, you know, weather the storm while your other opponent has all their access, or do you kind of be more cautious, spend it here and there, and recover it through parries and stuff like that? Like, there's just a lot of, like you said, expression. There's a lot of room for expression, a lot of things to think about in a round that I don't think you really would have had to in a lot of other games. And that is something that, another thing I really like about the OD gauge is that, and I saw this in Dungeon Fighters Duel, which they kind of, I think, maybe took this from. No matter what, if you use, let's say, a drive rush cancel and you only have one pip left, you'll still get it. They won't be like, oh, well, you can't do that. Yeah. They'll just take it. You know, they'll just take that and be like, okay, well, you're done now. DNF Duel did the same thing where it was like supers cost, 30 points of the meter or whatever. But it's like, if you had 20 left, that's fine. You know, it's a penalty either way. So we don't really think we have to penalize you further, which I think is good. Yeah. I think having to keep track of like exactly how many pips you had, that may have been a step too much. I don't know if on the fly people could go like, well, I have exactly 3 or I have exactly 2.5. So I got to, wait a little bit. Okay. That's going a little far, but occasional on the fly, look, I got to keep track of this, but if I really have to burn it, I can do it, and I'll go into burnout, and that's fine.
Yeah, I believe that it's supposed to be that fluid because of how rapidly the gauge changes based on whether or not you block something, whether like you like I preach about player agency, right? And like I think fundamentally, like your point about being able to just spend the rest of it on anything you want is that player agency, where it's like, if I want to drive rush, I want to be able to do it. I'll pay the penalty for it later in the form of burnout, but I would rather my move come out than not.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that from a UI standpoint as well, like the way the gauge is designed, how it changes in color from yellow to green, and specifically how it's segmented, but there's no number next to it. It shows that, one, it's changing. It would be changing too dynamically for the number. The number would just be like a constant switching back and forth and confuse the shit out of
DNF Duel, right? I don't like it. I think that's actually like DNF Duel. It's a hard number that goes down from 100 to like 30. I think it looks terrible. Like I don't think it conveys exactly what they want. There is a bar that goes with it that's a little bit easier to read, but the number I think is like, okay, I don't much care for that. But the colored gauges, I could get behind that.
Yeah, it's kind of like my father-in-law works in the aerospace industry and does a lot of like UI or not UI, but there's a lot of conversation about planes. And I guess recently there was that issue with the airports and all the planes being grounded because the system had a hiccup, right? Mm-hmm. And trust me, I'll tie this back into Street Fighter 6. I promise.
I trust you. Guile, Air Force, got it right. Continue.
So. Like the cool thing about those gauges though, right? Like people always say like, oh, it's because the planes are running on like 1960s technology. And then the usual response is it's because it works. And it's reliable compared to how it is now. Like if they were to modernize it. And so if we were to dissect that, the reason why it works is because a human being isn't going to constantly just process numbers thrown at them. There's a reason why our odometers on our cars are still like radial in nature and they're not completely just a number that goes up and down. I think some cars do that, but some cars even emulate that with the LCD screens, like that radial motion.
Bar goes up like along with the number, so you could see like, oh yeah.
So just like that with airplanes, like you have gauges more so than digitized numbers, and that is because when you're conveying change, you want to see what it looked like before and what it looked like after, what the potential states are along the way, versus something binary like a number where it's like, this is a 5. I have 5 bars and that's all I have is 5. Or this might drop down to 3, but I have to go and process that in the middle of a fight that the character for 3 looks different than the character for 5. But if I have a gauge with like a radial thing, or in the case of Street Fighter 6, where it's a drive, it's segmented out that moves up and down and it changes color. It's a way of conveying not just state, but also motion within that state. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. Yeah, it's like it makes it more alive. Like I think, and it stands out to the human eye,
Yeah.
rather than if it was just a number. Like one thing I'll criticize Street Fighter 3 for, which I think might didn't help, was that like you have like a segmented bar that technically you stock one, but the number is really small in the bottom corner. And I think a lot of people, if they play it and they just see the bar go away, it won't stack for you that like, oh, I have one stored up.
Right.
Well, I don't know if that's how it works, but like in a lot of newer games, you'll see it's like they'll have like a 3 segmented bar, and it's like you have one, you have another one, and now you got 3. And It looks very clear that you have a super ready.
And I
think that's a much.
Yeah, you're not going through the brain processing of a semantic of seeing like the number 3. Like you have to process, is that 3? You're not counting 3 things. You're looking at a symbol and saying that represents 3 different things, versus a segmented bar where you can see it and it's moving, it's fluctuating so much, that you're gonna lose it if it's a number.
Yeah, 100%. So I think with I'm not a huge fan of the UI of like the in-game menus, but I think for the battle, which is obviously the most important part, I think they really did a good job on it. Now let me ask you this. So obviously this is a controversial topic at times.
Mm-hmm.
Drive impact. So in my I'm going to ask you. So in my experience, even with just one beta, while I did feel drive impact was a very good move, I tend to agree with some that in time, the fact that most people are going to be able to react to one with their own, if anything. Yes. And while it is good, I don't think it's going to be like, oh man, everyone's just going to be drive rushing each other and it's going to be just drive impact the game. But what are your thoughts on that, having a little bit more experience than I do?
So
maybe I'm too optimistic.
I think most of the drive impact discourse is hot air, because what drive impact, there seems to be more thought put into drive impact than most think. I think that like a lot of times people are like, look at the enormous reward you get off a drive impact for landing it, for just blowing up a poke or something, right? Or somebody like doing low forward rekka, but number one, it scales a lot on hit. So like you're not eating a full combo. You still are eating a grounded combo, which is a pretty big deal. But in a lot of ways, that doesn't make it much different than a jump in. A jump in is a neutral ending tool that can be punishable because you're in the air and you're vulnerable. In the same way that an anti-air is, where if I'm playing a fireball game and then somebody jumps at me and I don't throw a fireball, I choose not to throw a fireball, I uppercut them instead, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the discourse around drive impact is that I can't work around it and whatnot. But in reality, it's no different than an anti-air, where you just structure your pressure differently and you account for that. In the same way that you're accounting and being ready for a jump, you just have to be ready for drive impact too. So your pressure, like the practical application of this is, everybody went into 6 playing the game like it was Street Fighter 5. So they were pressuring it with strongs over and over again. And everyone's being used to being able to hit 2 to 3 buttons in a row because everything was plus in 5. So I could do, with Cammy, for example, I could do crouch strong, crouching forward.
Stand strong, yeah.
Or stand strong, right? If I'm not paying attention during all of that and I'm just doing my rote frame trap because I know I'm plus and I can get away with it, I'm going to eat a drive impact.
Right, because you'll hit one and then you're already hitting the crouch medium kick and now it's too late.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, so what you do instead is you structure your pressure with cancelable and reactable normals, like jab, jab, jab.
Jab.
And then you cancel that in a drive impact. And in the same way that you are preparing, like you choose not to throw a fireball so you can be ready for the anti-air, you choose to go for jabs so you can be ready for the drive impact. They fundamentally, to me, they're the same thing. They are the ending of neutral in a game that's very neutral heavy. Does that answer your question?
It does, and I think I agree with you on most of that. So obvious, there's 2 frames of reference I have for it. So number 1 was like level 2 focus crumple in Street Fighter 4.
Sure.
If you counter hit a focus attack level 2, you got to crumple. It was a very good move. Even in late in the game, people would do it all the time. objectively, I feel like that was a better move than the drive impact is now, because you could cancel it, you could backdash out of it,
cancel it. Yeah,
it was faster. You know, it was there was all these things. It didn't cost anything, and we still played around it. I mean, it wasn't like it was the end all be all. It made some things more annoying. Like sometimes you go for a sweep or whatever, and all of a sudden, they focus attacked it. But ultimately, it was like, well, you know, I just have to do things a little bit different, and you know, there's certain focus break attacks and all this stuff. I was able to play around it, so I was like, okay, there's that. Number one. Number two, I think of an Injustice, there is a universal system with the heavy attack. They're both launching attacks. It's just which way do they launch you. The back one wall bounces you, and the forward one ground bounces you.
Okay.
Now, you can add armor to it at any point. You can hold it, and you add armor to it. The fastest you can do it is in 8 frames, but it's a slower game. So it's pretty fast.
Okay.
So it's like a lot of times you'll see someone, they'll wind up, and you can dash cancel it. Some of those are absolutely crazy. Like Catwoman in that game, her back three that wall bounces you is she ducks real low, kind of like Cammy on it. So she ducks real low and then does a really slow, you know what? I think it just is spiral arrow now that I think about it. But really, like that's what it is. And it low profiles like almost every move.
Okay.
And it's armor. So even if you were to miraculously hit her, now she just does that constantly. She can just throw it out. And a lot of them, they're either safe or they're plus on block. So it's like a lot of people just do them, and they don't care if it hits them. Then.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was a lot of people thought when the game first came out, like, well, shit. Now they still cost a bar, so there's a little bit more play in there. But like,
sure,
it was kind of the same thing. It's a slow move, but it's armored. It's a huge reward on hit. Is it going to take over the game? And it's like, well, it's really good to be clear, but there are certain characters. Obviously, theirs is better because of the way it hits. Whereas most of the when I think of the drive impact, a lot of them, while the animation is different, ultimately they hit about the same range.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't seem like anyone's got
very standardized.
Yeah. Even in focus attacks, that was true too. Like Fei Long's was way better than say, I don't know, Ken's.
Roses.
Roses.
Yeah,
Roses.
Too,
yeah. Or Balrog's, which was very short, although it was used for a more unique style. But like. Yeah, there was definitely a difference. Whereas the drive impact seems like it's universally like, well, they hit all about the same range.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like one is like, oh man, that's a sick kick that goes to full screen and it's hard to avoid. If that was true, I'd say there'd be a little bit more issue with it. But as it is now, with the speed it is, the fact that on block, and obviously when you're in the corner, it is a guard break move. So that even makes it scarier, and the potentials of it are really frightening. But I think, like you said, like we were talking about with the cross-ups too, it's like it doesn't eliminate that from the game. It just makes it so that the option is always in place. So you have to throw, or you have to be ready to cancel into drive impact with a cancelable normal that's fast enough, because you have, unless if you go back to like Street Fighter 5 and you're just hitting medium punches again and again, yeah, of course you're going to get drive impacted. It's just that they thought of a way to counter that style,
which was again, that was a very contentious point with people who didn't like Street Fighter 5, was that I don't like people doing autopilot pressure to me offensively.
Exactly.
That sucks. I want a tool to blow that up. And that's what DI is in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Everyone Street Fighter 5. The one thing you'll hear is the defensive options are bad.
Yeah.
That's what everybody says. So it's like, okay, well, we're going to give you plenty of them in this game, but we're also going to make it so that drive rush is like a crazily good offensive potential, gives you a ton of frame advantage. You can pretty much do whatever you want after a drive rush attack, and you're going to create links that would, haven't been seen since the likes of Street Fighter 2, and it's just fine, and you have both counterplay together, and they'll work all right. So, like I said, I think when you said it was, measured and calculated, I think that is what I would extend to the rest of the game, where it just feels like this is far more thought out than I think even like the first versions of Street Fighter 5 were.
Agree.
Whereas I didn't feel that same. I felt some ways they were like, well, we want this thing to be a hard rule. And then they just changed their mind. Well, we want certain characters to have invulnerable reversals.
Yep.
Okay, we actually don't want anybody to have meterless invulnerable reversals. They just changed their mind, right? Like, it's just like, well, we don't want that anymore. Whereas with this, it's like, I don't think they're going to change the universal mechanics that flippantly.
Yeah, everyone was clamoring to make it cost more, I think. That was
and they were like, no, and they just didn't bite, or haven't so far. Maybe they will, but like,
I hope they don't, realistically.
Yeah, I don't think they will, honestly. I feel like, even though it is like a controversial thing to bring up, I do think people will have gotten over it largely. Like, I don't see it come up as much when people talk about Street Fighter 6, whereas it did in that first beta.
Yeah.
I think seeing a lot of the players play it for a long time, and if you watch the high-level footage, Like I remember I saw the other day, there was a clip of like Momochi. He like 3 times in a row, someone went to do drive impact through his stuff. He was ready every time with his own counter drive impact. Like it was crazy.
Yeah.
Now, obviously he's one of the best players in the world, but I think that's a proof that like, yeah, if you're just autopiloting it, of course you're going to be able to eventually react to it with your own every time, as long as you account for it.
What it also does is like it gives people, Momochi is like a really good example. It gives people a shortcut to win. And I know that sounds shitty to hear, but like every fighting game salt or like poor experience out of the gates for a fighting game, like a lot of times it comes with ego, where it's like, I lost to this thing and I don't think I knew it was coming and I didn't know what to do about it. I couldn't do anything about it because the game wouldn't let me. This game sucks. But drive impact is like, I don't even really have to play the matchup. If I just know you're going to drive impact heavily, I can win the entire game off that. And that is like both a knowledge check, but also a like, I don't have to worry about the better player losing because I could just know to watch for that and then win just solely based on that. You know, it's got that little bit of old game feeling where it's like, you don't have to exert a ton of energy, like exploiting every single system mechanic. Sometimes you just want to win with like raw basics, in which case I have a read that are going to DI me constantly. I punish that. I win the game. I move on. I don't have to worry about getting scrubbed out.
Yeah, like I don't like it would feel very strange to me, like if someone got totally scrubbed out by drive impact. Like I feel like
that's what people are saying.
Yeah, I know. It feels like a lot of things would have to go wrong for that to happen, like constantly.
You know, I brought up earlier that it's a jump in, like it's similar to a jump in, and what that means, a jump in is in footsies a way to end neutral. You're no longer playing whiff punishing mode, or you're not sticking out pokes. You're actually just aggressing and trying to get frame advantage to kill the neutral. Every new game that I've seen that's come out that kills neutral, people get really pissed about it. Like Super Dash is my main example in Dragon Ball Fighters, where Dragon Ball, like Super Dash, it has a hard counter in that you launch. It homes in and it does all the movement for you, right?
Yeah.
So you don't have to play like Marvel 3 and have to be able to navigate a fly on fly.
Down H, I think, is like the universal, like, oh, it just
something like that. Yeah. You just everybody can beat it, but people hate moves that skip neutral because they feel like they get outplayed, and that's what DI is in a lot of ways. Where, and I feel like the Catwoman stuff, or the what was that called? Power? No, that's Tekken. Power Crush. The charge, the armor move that you were talking about in Mortal Kombat. It's the same deal, right? Where it's like, I'm going to use this to skip neutral.
Yeah, like well, in Mortal Kombat they don't have it as much. But they have like a fatal blow. That's like the super move kind of. In Injustice, it's a meter burn back 3 is what people call it, because it's back and hard punch and back and heavy, and you can meter burn it. So that's a move that, like, yes, like for example, Aquaman, his was so long that even when you were holding back, it was like, I'm still gonna get hit by this. Like I have no choice. He just does it, and the game ends for a second while he does that.
Yeah. And people don't like moves like that. Like it reminds me of Family Guy, where I'm not a huge Family Guy watcher, but like there's a episode where they're making fun of Asian drivers, and the guy is driving and he's like, good luck everybody else, and he does this and he just goes into traffic. And a lot of moves are like that in fighting games, where it's like, good luck dealing with this. You're just gonna do it. I'm gonna call a beam, and I'm gonna call an assist and teleport in Marvel. I'm gonna super dash in Dragon Ball. I'm gonna helm breaker. I'm gonna DI. Like, it's just a move that ends neutral, and you, like, if you don't like the way that is, and you don't want to account for that, then maybe the game's not for you.
Yeah, well, and it's also it's always existed. There's always a move that, like, oh god, here it comes. Like, I'm just not like, you know, like if you go back to Street Fighter 2 Classic, you know, ST or something, like Vega just does a claw, or Vega just does a claw dive, and you're like, well, fuck me, you know, it is what it is, you know. It's just, there's moves that just like, well, yeah, they take up the whole screen, and there's nothing I can do about it. I have to just think about what I'm going to do next, and it always exists. Most people just have preferences. It's what am I willing to deal with here? Maybe I can't here. So like with Street Fighter 5, I said all the time, was I willing to deal with the constantly shifting, like the having to guess on wake up and stuff like that? No, I wasn't. Sure. That's a bridge too far for me, but that's fine. I don't think it makes the game like worse in general. It's just not for me, right?
Right.
So I think that's fine. I don't know what game you could play where you get away from that. Even in like Virtua Fighter, which I think is very smartly designed. There's just some moves that like, shit, man. Like I just have to take it, and I can't do anything about it.
Yeah. And the irony is that Drive Impact is also the answer to those moves that you just have to take it. So Honda Headbutt is a brilliant example of just moves that you just had to deal with in 4, right? You couldn't focus attack it because it armor broke, and he was just going to do it at you. And you're going to take the chip damage, and you probably wouldn't be able to punish it. You just got to take it. And Honda's in this game, but there's no evidence to show that we can't just Drive Impact if we see a headbutt coming. And so,
True.
Like, it's the answer as well as the question.
Yeah. That's actually something interesting to think about. Like moves like that, Blanca Ball is going to be another one.
Right.
What are we going to be able to do against Drive Rush? Like, is it going to be enough that maybe they're airborne while it hits them so they kind of bounce back?
Yeah.
It's something to think about because we don't, the characters that we got in the beta, while they are unique in some ways, a lot of them were the same arch attack for the most part.
Yes.
We didn't really have like a character like Blanca. Didn't have a character, a grappler, like we mentioned before. We didn't have a grappler. We didn't see how they interacted. So it's definitely going to be interesting when the full game comes out, how these mechanics mix with typical fighter traits like a command grab or a character like Dalzim where his limbs are super long. Does that mean he's more vulnerable to Drive Impact than he normally would have been? Because odds are he's not going to be able to cancel those long moves. So it's like, is he going to have to worry about that more than other characters?
Yep. Or is he going to benefit from having those same options, right?
Exactly. Is it now going to be hell to get in on Dalzim because he throws out a fireball and then you jump and he counters your jump and then you just try to like, okay, I'm gonna go through it, and then he Drive Impacts you and you're like, oh my god, I can't touch him. This is the worst character ever. Which I'm leaning towards, by the way. I'm bullish on Dalzim in Street Fighter 6.
I also am bullish on Dalzim because I'm like, you can parry a limb, but what happens when you finally knock his ass down and then he perfect parries you and back throws you?
And his throw takes forever. He's going to be super annoying. He's going to be able to drive rush like his crouching medium punch or whatever.
Yeah,
I'm not ready mentally for that to happen. Okay, like it's just I have to understand that he's just going to bully me from the whole screen and get huge frame advantage, and I just have to take it, and I'm not going to be able to do anything about it.
Well,
but that's the fun of the drive rush. That's the fun of the drive system in general. Is that there are all these possibilities that I'm already thinking about. Whereas with Street Fighter 5 and to some extent Street Fighter 4, I didn't have these feelings. I felt like they were a lot more locked down. And I start to finally understand when I would hear old timers be like, well, I don't like Street Fighter 4. I don't like Street Fighter 5 that much. And I was always curious, like, I wonder why that is. I don't feel that same way. But as I've played more games and I've understood those older games a lot better, I understand now what it means when they say, like, I didn't feel like I could express myself very well in this game. I don't feel like Street Fighter 6 has a lot of those problems. Maybe I'm wrong, but the first impression I have is very, very positive.
I think they took that expression and built it into the gauge. I also think that there's a degree of rose tinted glasses here, or like shiny and new. The fact that we're in the discovery phase yet, like I think a lot of the counterbalance to expression is optimization, and optimization always comes last to the later phases of a game's life cycle, right? So the fact that number one, this game's not even out yet, and we're basing all of our opinions off of two different 3-day beta tests, right?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like no one's optimized yet, so because of that, they feel like they have that creative freedom. That said, though, the drive meter forces so many new situations that it's kind of hard to optimize in general, so you might still get that expression. I think we're going to land somewhere healthily in the middle. I think that there's still always going to be a better idea, but people I don't think will feel as limited to like pigeonholed into doing it, at least not for season 1. We'll see how the game evolves.
See how the next one pans out. The one thing I could say that I wonder about sometimes is like if it's going to be like, because it seems like the only real way to like keep your offense like, and like, because it's not as frame trappy. Some characters can do it, but like for the most part, it's not like you can do medium into medium and it like totally is a counter hit trap every time.
Right.
Not anymore, at least. And I wonder if the fact that really only chain jabs are something to keep like
for frame traps.
For frame traps. I wonder if that'll get old or there's enough counterplay to it. Because I do think about that sometimes, that maybe that might get a little bit old where they might have to. But then again, I think like, well, that's why they have the drive rush, right? Like to get the frame advantage, you got to do the drive rush first.
You can you can play Street Fighter V with if you just drive rush everything. You're right, +2. You can fake a throw. You can do a shimmy. You can do all that shit, right?
And that's why, like, so when you throw and you don't have to guess between the back and the forward, no matter what, if you drive rush, you're still going to be in their face, able to do a meaty probably. My guess is people will optimize the timing for that too. Speaking of optimization. And therefore, that will start to feel familiar, where it's like, okay, now I have the frame advantage I actually want. Yeah. Whereas, like, just playing the game normally, not using all the mechanics, I don't feel that way. That could be my thing too. Like I certainly didn't use every single mechanic to its full extent. So maybe that is a unfounded complaint I have right now, or maybe a worry. But it's something I think about, that perhaps that having the frame data so loose, because it hasn't been this way in a long time, where it's just like
everything's negative.
Nothing. Yeah. Everything's negative unless you use something else. Like that's kind of interesting. That's why the Mortal Kombat player in me is a little bit more intrigued, because that is how Mortal Kombat is. It's obviously structured very, very different game, but I feel the same way, where it's like, well, yeah, it's you kind of you're more basing it around how negative can I get before it's a problem, instead of how plus can I make this right now. Yeah.
I think the negativity of the frame data solves for two problems. Number one, the problem with Street Fighter V, which is I have to memorize frame data, and that fucking sucks for a lot of people. They don't like doing that. I personally, like, I don't have too many hangups about it, but I do understand the desire of being like, hey, I want to learn this fighting game, and someone just gave me a spreadsheet, and I don't want to do that. Right?
Just hand me Excel.
Right. So it's like, in 5, it's like, okay, so low forwards mainly are -2 on block. Some of them are -4. Colleen's is +2. Yeah. Cody's is plus, Vega's is plus, and you have to memorize all that shit, right? In 5, it's 6 rather, it's like every button is probably negative unless it's glowing green, or if it's the one move that I have to memorize.
Yeah, like Chun-Li, I know her goofy elbow.
Yeah, elbow's plus, right?
That's plus, right? Like I could do that. Like that's good enough for me. Yeah. I think the other issue with Street Fighter V is that, let's say you didn't know the frame data. A lot of older players talk about, well, I would just feel around. I didn't really know the frame data, but I just felt around. With Street Fighter V, feeling around could get you fucked up pretty badly, because it's like, well, let me jab after this, see what happens. Well, it didn't even come out because the priority system beat me. So that was a bad idea. I think in Street Fighter 6, you'll have even in the beta, because I played every character just to get a feel for everybody.
Yeah,
I definitely could, I didn't know the frame data, and I think the great FAT app already has it up there. So if you want to study, you can.
Yeah, but it's in the game too, on the frame bar.
It is in the game, yeah, in the practice mode. You can figure it out. Yeah. But I felt like in general, I could generally figure out what was negative and what was positive just by, hey, I traded here when I, probably wouldn't have otherwise. That's a clue. And I didn't die for it. So that's good.
It's also because your assumption, like just the raw numbers game, is that chances are, like percentage-wise, it's probably going to be minus, because there's only one button that's plus. So if it's not that button, then it's minus, and you're good. You can hit the button.
And if they drive rush me, they're probably plus.
Yeah, if they're glowing green, then I don't hit a button unless I get thrown, and then you start talking about the mental game, right? And it's so that's
like you said, you have to throw,
right. So that's problem one to be solved, right? Is that you don't have to memorize all the frame data, and that's by making everything negative, then you don't have to worry about memorizing all that stuff. The other problem that it's solving is that the player expression side of it again, which is like, if I'm plus on everything, then it's essentially like a dice roll. If I'm +2 in Street Fighter V, then a throw could be coming, a frame trap could be coming, or a shimmy could be coming, and I just got to deal with that. If I'm if I'm pressuring in Street Fighter 6, like it's like one or two things, and that's kind of it. And so those one or two things are optimal, but they're predictable and they have low return. So if you want higher return, you have to go and do some of the unpredictable and unsafe stuff, like walk up throw while negative, right?
Yeah.
Walk up throw while negative.
Uppercut.
Right. Or walk up uppercut.
Yeah.
I'm thinking or like stealing a turn, being -2, but still taking a step forward and hitting a button again, just to kind of like take that advantage. And realistically, they could have jabbed you out of it, right? But then you also, So say you get mashed out of that and you're like, man, I'm so mad that everything's negative in this game. I just want to be plus. I want to continue my pressure. Maybe the solution is not what you think it is, where it's like, how do I stop someone from jabbing? Maybe you parry instead, and you take your -2 and you parry, and then they fall for the frame trap. The frame trap of -2, they fall for that. They get perfect parried. So you still have an answer to read that someone is disrespecting your pressure, but the answer is different than the immediate solution that would come to mind from a traditional fighting game or from previous fighting games. So what that creates then is like, I have to make that hard read on that parry to really abuse my minus frames and to disrespect the frames, to quote Scott. And that in turn,
disrespect the frames.
Yeah. But if you're disrespecting the frames, you're having that conversation with that opponent versus +2. I'm taking +2 over and over and over again. I'm ignoring what you have to do. You have to dice roll. It's that conversation again, right? Mm-hmm. Where by being minus, you have to take more chances to continue your pressure. And if you take more chances, that's more player expression.
Yeah, absolutely. Disrespecting the frame sounds like a bowling term.
Yeah,
he was disrespecting. He was disrespecting the frames out there.
Disrespecting the frames. Yeah.
Well, so that again, that speaks to like Mortal Kombat. Like Mortal Kombat, you're always negative for the most part, but stealing your turn, we all know what that is. Like if you play Mortal Kombat, yeah, sometimes you do jab and it's like -6, and you just do it again, Giga Chad, and it's like, well, you can't do that. That's not what the frames say. Well, fuck you. I don't care.
Yeah.
I sometimes you do it because they are players get lazy and they wait and they wait and they wait. And it's like, well, I'm going to take advantage of that. And that is part of the expression. It's part of just, well, I'm just going to be aggressive and attack and attack and attack and attack. And if you're just going to sit there, I'll keep doing it.
Yep.
No matter what. So I think that's great too. I think
you don't need the +2 to hold your hand, right? You don't need to rely on the positive frame data and the knowledge checking behind that.
Yeah, because you get into the mindset of like, I would, when I play Street Fighter 5, I do this constantly. Like I'm playing as like Sakura, and it's like I have to land the elbow stand medium punch, or else I can't do anything. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, not necessarily. That's not true. But I felt that way because it led to everything. It led to my combos. It got me plus frames on block. It beat out a bunch of moves. I had to do it, and it's like, well, I don't feel like I have to do. Like if I'm playing as Luke, I don't have to do crouching medium punch. That is my only plus on block button, but I don't have to do it. I can do other things. You know, there is options. There's stuff to mess around with. The other thing I was going to mention, I just noticed this recently. I noticed that almost every character can do like 3 chained moves into a attack.
A special. Yeah.
Yeah. Like every character can do like short jab special.
Yeah.
Standing jab special, which in Street Fighter 5, that was considered a very good, holy, geez, you can do a 3-hit confirm.
Yeah.
That was like, everyone would look for that and go like, oh, that character's good. They can do a 3-hit confirm. Now we don't even have to, like, it's like they thought about that. They're like, well, that must feel good that people like doing that. They can do dun, 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 dun. And it's small damage. It's not like it's a huge amount. And every character can, like Tatsu, like they didn't have that. Oh, Tatsu doesn't hit crouchers for Ryu. that existed in Street Fighter 5 for way longer than it ever should have. Sure. They were just like, nope, from the beginning, he can do a 3-hit confirm in a Tatsu. Chun-Li can do it. I'm sure into lightning legs or probably spinning bird kick, honestly.
Yep.
And it's just, I think that stuff is great. I think that's the kind of thing that's like, that's more fun. That doesn't feel as limiting. I can, frame trap with jabs, and there's still an option to just 3-hit confirm. I don't have to do it after 2 and just like react like super hard. Yep. I think that stuff is great.
It's kind of like, the problem you're trying to solve with the jabs, right, is you want to do a fast move and you want to convert off of that combo, right? So by committing to the jab, like why make, so in 5 you could do that but you'd only have 2 buttons to confirm it, right? You have to go jab special.
Yeah.
Why does that have to be harder than doing 3? Like 3 is fine. There's an artificial skill barrier that's put there, when in reality you should be focusing on the exchange of he chose to interrupt with a fast button and I got blown up for it. Why make that harder when I guessed wrong?
Mm-hmm. And it's also, it makes it for a weird, like when you're balancing, it's like, wow, we're so limited that this is what, like Luke is one of the best characters in Street Fighter 5 solely because he can do jab target combo.
Yep, into Oki.
It's amazing. In Oki, it's an amazing thing, and it's like that sounds so silly, like just because he can do stuff from his jabs, that makes him the best. Yep. And I think that speaks to how it sometimes limiting it can feel when it's like, well, some characters like Urian, he can do jab, headbutt, but the headbutt doesn't even hit if they're crouching. He's got to do EX. And it's like, yeah, that kind of sucks. That's not great for him. And is there any reason why characters should be so limited in their jab stuff? Probably not. I mean, if you go back to like Street Fighter 4, where you could link the whole world off of your jabs, yeah, that's something to think about.
Yeah.
But that's not the game we're playing anymore. So I don't feel like they need to be as conservative, and they haven't been. So I think that's good.
And the other side of it is like, well, we just got done talking about negative frames and whatnot. You still need to have some semblance of frame traps in the game. And so the chained jab is like doing 3 chain jabs and essentially making 2 frame traps out of that. Like, that's going to be, you still want to reward people going for those traps. Like, we still need to have frame traps. And so if we're going to do that, we might as well make all 3 hits confirmable, or like a 3-hit confirmable jab,
Right. So you can, like, you don't always have to be like, oh, I saw the counter hit, now I did it.
Yeah. Let's remove needless execution barriers and focus more on the player interaction. Right.
Right. Because what you'll see is people in Street Fighter 5, you'll do, like, if you're playing Ed, you'll do crouch jab, crouching medium punch. And they do that because we can't react to the counter hit. They just hope it does. And that will combo anyways. Right. So, like, I don't think you'll be seeing that as much in Street Fighter 6. People still do it now. My guess is more of a habit than anything. But, now they have, like, and even they have the punish counter, which will make, like, because whiff punishing is also something that's hard to, like, tangibly show, like, this is really important. I don't think anything's more important than, like, hey, if you whiff punish, it's a punish counter, and you get, like, sometimes some characters get the whole world out of it. Like I said, Luke can do stand medium punch into his jab target combo, and it's like, wow, if it's a punish counter, like, that's good. That makes that move in general will be much stronger for the fact that it's forward advancing. It's made to whiff punish. Like, that is what Luke is supposed to do. And it's like, that is perfect. That's what a punish counter should be. And now it's not just off of uppercuts. It's off of every move.
Right. That to me, like, cements this game as, like, this. That's why I'm not all Street Fighter Defense Force or Street Fighter 5 Defense Force on this one, because the punish counter system, like, it feels like a natural evolution from what they try to do with 5, which is they've made DPs so easy to do over the past couple of years, like over the past decade of fighting games, because they wanted to make them all the shortcuts and whatnot, and they wanted to get to the meat of it, which is the player to player interaction. But now we have this really easy thing to do that beats everything. So how do we still keep it powerful while also keeping it balanced? And the answer was to make it crush counterable on block, which to me, that sold me on Street Fighter 5. And then to see that they took that a step further with 6 and they said, no, like, if you just throw out Tatsu unnecessarily, then you're going to get punish countered. If you get whiff punished, you're going to get punish countered. And it really emphasizes that a notion of commitment that they tried to do with Street Fighter 5, but didn't really capture the masses with. I think the punish counter system is the defining trait for this game.
Right. And if you I talked about this in the panel podcast too. You like to see that they are taking ideas from older games, and it's not like we're forgetting the past. Like, people like Street Fighter 4, people like Street Fighter 5. There are good redeeming things you can take from them. It's not all bad. Right. And I think some people in their mind, it becomes like, well, that game was trash. It wasn't worth taking anything from. Street Fighter Cross Tekken. There's stuff in Street Fighter 6 I just see from Street Fighter Cross Tekken. Stuff that characters could do with that, right?
No, I base my character choice Chun-Li in Street Fighter 6 because she has so many tools that are similar to Cross Tekken Tekken Chun-Li.
Yeah.
Like forward strong being cancelable. The moment I found out forward strong was cancelable, I'm like, what the fuck is this? That's the last time she was top 3 because of this.
Yeah, and it was the classic super turbo one, not the high hitting one like that. Like, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
When I saw that, I was like, oh, so it's Jover, man. Like, this is not good. Which is why, like, I think I said earlier too, I don't get the groaning about Chun-Li. I don't think, if you're a Chun-Li person, you are eating in this game so far.
Yeah.
Maybe she sucks against grapplers, maybe. I don't know, but, like, damn. She's pimped out,
She has to play a little bit differently than Street Fighter 5 Chun, in my opinion.
For sure. Yeah.
Like, the big thing everyone cries about with Chun in this game is that her fierce isn't as good. But it's not that it isn't as good, it's that it's used differently. It's the same way I've been addressing pretty much every criticism of this game so far, is that it's not that the solution to your problem doesn't exist. It's that the solution isn't the one that you want it to be. So
yes, yeah. Well, I don't want to. Well, okay.
Stand Fierce is not a poke in this game. Stand Fierce was a poke in Third Strike. It was a poke in 4. It was a poke in 5. It's not a poke in this game. Forward Strong is the poke that you want to use instead. So you could still accomplish what you want to do. You just have to not do that button.
Which is, in a way, still honorable to a Chun-Li that existed in older games. Her standing strong in Cross Tekken, in Super Turbo. That was her move. God. That was the move you did. You didn't do Stand Fierce, right? Like Stand Fierce was just not. It was good, but it was not like, oh, this is the best poke. No, it's crouch medium kick and Stand Fierce.
And Cross, you would do forward strong into heavy legs, which was plus on block, tag cancel behind it, and do a high low.
Yep. In fact, I don't even think it was. I didn't even think you had to hold forward. I think that was just her.
Yeah, you just did it. Yeah, I forgot you just did it. And so you could also you could buffer it with a boost chain too.
She was obnoxious as hell in that game, and that was why, because you could just autopilot doing that constantly.
Yep.
And that was perfect. So we already talked about the characters. I don't want to get into those too much. But
sure. Yeah.
I just feel like, this is a game where, a lot of people have been really down on Capcom. I certainly have been critical for Street Fighter V for not just the game, but like the launch about it and just some of the ways they came with it. And I just feel like they have completely turned it around for Street Fighter 6 in a way that I never certainly predicted. I had no idea that they had it's so well thought out, and they're going to give $2 million for Capcom Cup, which is probably an increase of 50% than the last Capcom. That is way more money than has ever been at Capcom Cup by leaps and bounds.
But more than any other fighting game tournament.
Well, yeah, it's the best. It's the biggest fighting game prize pool to ever exist just by existing. That's nuts, right? That that amount of money has never been available. But it will be with Street Fighter 6. And, now it's hey, they're going to play it on PC probably for Capcom Cup.
Oh, yeah, maybe. Yeah. That's a big deal.
Big deal, right? There is change. It sounds like they're more open to just having more fun with this game, and just, everyone gets excited for it. And it's not oh, we're going to add the Zenny system later, and we're going to add this live service stuff that no one really wants. It's no, it's just, we want to make it the best game, and it's polished and it looks good. It's going to come out when it's ready. It's not going to come out early. One thing that I'm sad that's not in the beta that we can't see is in fact, you probably won't see it online, which is sad, but when you pick a character and they do the walkout for the stage, and they all have their own unique animations for what side they're on and stuff. That is one of the coolest things I've seen. And I can't wait to see all of those. Someone's going to make a YouTube compilation of all those together. I'm going to watch that 100% because I can't wait to see what that stuff looks like.
I think they realized that the characters themselves were lacking character, for lack of a better phrase. And so they juiced out every possible opportunity to be here's a way for a character to show their swagger. And then walkout animations, the face thing on the load screen,
that's awesome too. I love that.
Everything is about shoving the style of these characters in your face as much as possible, I think.
100%. I talked with a Mortal Kombat dev when I was at the reveal for Mortal Kombat 11, and I thought it was pretty interesting that the way he talked about the game, he designed Captain Cold in Injustice 2. Captain Cold, not a very cool character, pun intended. Nothing about him is cool. If you ever look at him, he just whatever.
That's harsh, talk man. About chill out.
I know, right? I gotta take it easy. I play it cool. But the thing about him was that every time he talked about I made him have this giant icicle block drop from the sky, because that's really cool. And then he's got this move where he makes up a big ice wall, and I thought it would be cool if he kicked it at you. And you could tell the way he was talking about it wasn't what would Captain Cold do? He was this is badass. That's what I want him to do. I want him to kick this block of ice at you. And does Captain Cold do that? I don't really care. And then also the other thing is I also talked to him about Scorpion, and I mentioned I was being a hyper nerd. I shouldn't have said this. It really exposed me. I said, in Mortal Kombat 11, this is the first time that when Scorpion does the spear, it doesn't pop you up for a combo, because in Mortal Kombat 11, unless you spend meter, it doesn't do the pull them in and they're stunned. He just does an attack at the end.
Oh, okay.
And he looked at me for a bit and was well, yeah. The thing about Scorpion is that we feel that so long as he has the spear and the teleport punch, that's great. That's Scorpion. We can do whatever the hell else we want with him. People are going to love that he can do that. And it's just like, yeah, that's right. So like if you think about it with Street Fighter, as long as Ryu does the Hadoken and the hurricane kick and the uppercut, you can do whatever you want with him. You can give him new moves. You can do all this stuff. As long as he has those 3 moves, you're not going to feel like, oh, well, people won't recognize. People won't feel the same as they did way back in the day. And I feel like they've been chasing this nostalgia for so long. They won't change the costumes. They won't change the moves. Like, for so long that I felt like it was like, okay, you guys, you got to let go sometime. Like, we remember Street Fighter. Trust me, it was a cultural zeitgeist. Nobody has forgotten it ever. Even when Street Fighter 4 came out, the idea that people forgot about Street Fighter was silly. So we can move on. We can do new things. And it's like, they really are. With this one, it's like, yeah, Ryu's got a whole new costume. He's got new moves.
They gave him a new move,
He powers up his old moves. Chun-Li, we gave her a bunch of new moves. Guile has a new move for the first time in 1,000 years. Like Rita Repulsa, after 10,000 years, he's finally free. It's just like they finally have let go of all that stuff. And like you said, they're emphasizing the characters. That's what makes the IP strong. Like when you put Ryu in Fortnite and Smash and stuff like that, it's because people want to see the Hadouken. They want to see him be cool. And it's like, if however long you go where he doesn't have a character, those crossovers will cease to mean anything.
Mm-hmm.
If Ryu's in Fortnite and it's just, well, the avatar is Ryu. Well, what is that? That doesn't do anything for it. But if he's got a voice you want to hear, if he's got moves you want to see him do, that makes it all the more valuable, right?
Yeah, like, even for the new characters too. Like I understand like the idea of being hamstrung by legacy, but by and large they've taken an additive approach. In 5 they actually took stuff away, and people were really not okay with that. But they added stuff to these characters instead. And then for the new characters, like that's something I've been thinking about a lot of. Like, is from a competitive standpoint, like there's a lot of moves that I just don't find useful. And so 5 knew that. The people that developed 5 knew that, and so they stripped them out, like proximity normals and stuff like that.
Yeah,
but then what that really did is alienate a bunch of people that just wanted to do the cool shit, like kick an ice cube with King Cold, right?
Captain Cold, yeah, exactly.
Captain Cold.
Yeah.
King Cold is a Dragon Ball character.
Yes, yeah.
But
Frieza's father, I believe.
Yeah, ice. What was I gonna say? So, but
they took away stuff, and it was like,
right. So, but for the new characters, like in a previous Absolute Extra, we were going through the Lily trailer, right? And there's a shot in the Lily trailer where she takes out a camera and takes a picture of you, and it does damage to Blanca in that trailer, right? We're not going to use that. That's a taunt, right? But to the, like, somebody just buying the game off of a shelf and just wants to do cool shit in a fighting game, keep that move in, right? And so I think they realized that between 5 and 6, which is, let's not sterilize it. Let's let useless things be in there. Let's let broken things be in there, because our universal mechanics are strong enough to withstand that. And then except for Geef, don't give him his green hand. Except for Geef.
No, never again. Yeah,
fuck that. I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah, green hand sells. It's over. Like, you got to go. You got to move on. But in that same previous episode, we talked about Zangief is more showman than he's ever been.
True. Yeah, they gave him new target combos, right?
New target combos. He's pumping to the crowd for his moves.
Yep.
He's more flashy in general, and I think that speaks to how. Whereas with Street Fighter V Zangief, not only did he have the same outfit, there really wasn't much about him that really, like, you could have put him in Street Fighter 2 and he kind of would have not stood out that much, other than the graphics got better. I think that's what people don't want to see. I think it's like, okay, well, we've got all this brand new technology. We have this ability to really pump these characters up. What can you do with it? I'll give credit to KOF and Tekken and King of Fighters and all this stuff, or Mortal Kombat. They do that. Every iteration, the character's got a new costume.
Yeah. And
it's like, well, it's Kazuya. He turns into the devil and he shoots a laser at you. He's always going to do that. We know that. He's going to have the dumb hair. He's going to have the eyeball that's red. He's going to do the Wind God Fist. That's it. And we can do whatever else we want. We can experiment. We can take away moves. We can do new moves. As long as we hit those 4 things, let's just play with it a little bit. And play is I feel like Street Fighter 6. When I played that beta, and I didn't feel like, well, I'm restricting myself by playing this new character. It was like, I wanted to play every character. I wanted to see what all of them could do. I felt like it was fresh and new. And obviously a lot about, you said, is rose-colored glasses. It's brand new. You're going to have that new toy feel. Will that last forever? Probably not. I'm sure I'm going to get frustrated when the game comes out and I lose to something that feels like it's horseshit. as we all do.
Sure.
But as I said, I did not have that feeling when I played Street Fighter V, because Street Fighter V felt more safe. It felt like they really tried to play it safe, and I felt like it was a disadvantage. And it just doesn't feel like in this game that they did that. They really took a risk. They added this drive system, different than what they've ever done before, and I think it's going to pay off.
I think that with Street Fighter 2, like if we go back and look at some of the main entry lines of Street Fighter, right? Street Fighter 2 was its own thing. It was the thing, the original thing. Street Fighter 3 was its own thing, and honestly received a lot of critical panning out of the gates because of it, and that's what scared Capcom into doing Street Fighter 4 and playing that one safe. But because it had been so long, it was fresh and new. They still started with the 8 World Warriors, but they added all these new mechanics and stuff, and it had its own identity still because it was new, and even though it was still throwing back to 2. And then 5 came along, and they couldn't lightning couldn't strike twice with Street Fighter 4 because you would need another 10-year gap to do that.
Yeah.
And so they just in turn tried to refine what they thought Street Fighter 2 and Street Fighter 4 should ultimately end up looking like, and they sterilized it too much. And then in 6, so it didn't have a voice. It didn't have a voice at all. It was just we're seeking perfection, and we're not seeking stylistic or a theme overall. And then this game, they've gone complete 180 on that and been like, all right, we did the sterilized thing. It didn't go over so well. Also, our launch was botched completely. But now let's kind of bring it back to like Street Fighter 3, where we're gonna pick a vision and we're gonna commit to it. You might not like the vision. You might not like the way these graphics are overly realistic and we got rid of anime. You might not like Drive Impact. You might think parries devalue the game. But this is our fucking game, and they're gonna, they're really committing to it in my mind.
Plus, just look at Cammy.
Just look at Cammy.
My God, like we've done it. We've reached the pinnacle here. I also wonder if, like, now that Ono's out of there, and Street Fighter 5, I think quite clearly didn't have the time or money that Street Fighter 6 is getting put into it.
Yeah,
all that stuff matters too. And I imagine once we hear more about the development cycle of it, we will find out that, like, yes, we had the time and money to play around, and we had a new engine, so it felt fresh, and we had people who knew how to make it in that system, and they knew what they were doing. That all matters too, and that's all geeky stuff we don't have to get into. But I think
I'd love to.
Yeah, honestly, I think that stuff. I think that stuff is going to super matter. Like when you find out about Street Fighter 6, is like, well, Street Fighter 5, we much smaller team, not as much money, not as much time. We did what we could. We would have liked to do more. I think you can even see in the concept art, like one of the first was like Bison and Ryu fighting, and Ryu has an outfit that looks like his Street Fighter 6 outfit.
Yeah, so what happened with 5 is they did that. They had like a prototyping phase that was done in-house in Capcom, right? And they did this. They basically kind of tried to make what Street Fighter 6 ended up being. They realized that it just wasn't it wasn't the direction they wanted to go in. They took too long doing it, and so they ran to Dimps from they had Dimps do it instead. And that's an external studio from Capcom.
Yeah, of course.
They're the ones
they did 4, like Street Fighter 4 and stuff.
And Cross.
Cross, yep.
But they were also like, don't use the engine that you built for 4 and Cross. Use Unreal because we chose that one for you. And they didn't know how to do Unreal. They patchworked it together really quickly. And then the game comes out, and it's like, well, Dimps is completely separate from Capcom, so they don't, they have to work together to actually fix this game. And by the end of season 4 or 5, they had already spun up an internal Capcom team to handle maintenance from 5 from then on out. And that's when you get the cool shit like Rose and Oro coming out and being like, the game's on the right track again. We added V-Shift, all this other stuff.
The tracksuit costumes, which it sounds like a silly thing. I actually thought all of those were super cool.
Oh yeah, that was supposed to be tied in with the Olympics too, and that had the pandemic fucked the Olympics. Yeah, but all that to say is that, like, thank you Monster Hunter, because I think Monster Hunter triggered a reorg within Capcom, so they no longer have to go to Dimps and develop Street Fighter as a contracting job, or as like having like subcontract that out. They can instead build it in-house with the RE engine and their own in-house engine, and
that they know how to use.
Right. And then if you look at the way this game is developed, like, or the way the game is like broken into the different pieces, like the World Tour mode and the Battle Hub and the Fighting Ground, right? The Battle Hub is just Monster Hunter, It's the same like I bet it's the same team as Monster Hunter, where it's all the same assets, and you're running around at a gathering hub in Monster Hunter, and you're going into the instance of the game. In which case, that's the gameplay that we've been watching and we've been talking about, and that was developed by the Street Fighter V guys, right? And they've been seasoned enough. And then all the single player stuff and the cinematics and stuff, you can give that to the RE team. So they basically can rather than force Dimps to do everything and like shove it down a single pipeline where it could essentially look like shit on the way out, and that's what ended up happening. Mm-hmm. You break it out into 3 different teams, all contributing to a different piece, and then have a unifying vision to sew them all together, to stitch them all together into this patchwork of a game. And it all works pretty cohesively, and that's a huge accomplishment.
Yeah. When I've talked to NetherRealm people, they've always said the same thing. It's like, you have no idea how much it benefits us that the vast majority of what we do is made in house. Yeah. We don't have to farm it out. We farm out we might farm out like the facial capture technology. We might farm out some of the graphic stuff, but for the most part, the art, the gameplay, the online tower stuff, that's all done in house. They can all communicate with each other. We know what we want. We have a unified vision, and we get to make our game with the money that we want. And that makes all the difference in the world. Like, that really does. Then you don't have to outsource it to a guys that can make fighting games, but like, that's not really what they do. They didn't make the art for it. They don't know what to emphasize. They don't know what pops, I think Dimps actually does a fairly good job in the games they've made. Like, I don't think they're terrible.
I think they got a shit hand with Street Fighter V and the low budget and having to get rescued by Sony and all that other stuff.
I just think sometimes it happens, right? Like, sometimes you miss it, and it's unfortunate, but there will always be another time. You can always make it right, and I think that is what we're running into now. We just see, like, even though all this horrible stuff has happened in the last 3 years, they've come out of this. I think in my last blog I wrote it. They came out. They've shaken off the last bits of ash. They've emerged like a phoenix somehow from the ashes of this terrible situation in the world, with complete rollback netcode. We're going to do 120 hertz. We're going to maybe run it on PC. We're going to give it $1 million. Like, that's all. Literally everything you could have wanted is almost happening. And it's, to me, even, it's still a little hard to believe. Like, that's crazy that we got all of that when you would have had to fight for just rollback back in, like, that would have been a war. It would have happened midway through the game, would have launched with delay base. We could have got that. We didn't. In my opinion, the netcode is solid. I may have quibbles about the matchmaking, but I think the netcode holds up very well. I think that they have really done a good job with all those little things that, again, would have been a fight before. It was like, we got to get to this one thing, and then we'll get to the next thing, and we'll get to the next thing. And then it's like, okay, well, even in this time, we've got every single part that I normally complain about. I still don't like the UI or whatever, but also, like, old habits die hard. That's all those games that come from that part of the world, for some reason, just seem to have these really quirky, goofy UIs that just I don't know who they're for. But that's it. That's all. I can't really say anything about that.
I agree. There are times when I feel like it's almost like a too good to be true scenario, because when 5 came out, and I really liked 5, like the gameplay around 5, and the rest of the package was just not up to snuff. But it bummed me out that I couldn't play this game that I liked with a lot of people that whose opinions I valued, like a lot of my friends that I played 4 with or Marvel with. And I don't think I'm going to get that same. I'm never going to get the magic of 4 again. No, we're just in too many there's too many fighting games out right now. We're at different points in our lives, all that other stuff. But this to me feels like a second chance for 5, because it has all the stuff that I like about 5 in it, and it has a lot of my friends like yourself that are interested in this game when they didn't necessarily find favor with 5.
That's a really good point. And also, like, now that, like, the CPT stuff can do regionals and online is good, you can enter online tournaments and stuff. You have way more incentive to keep playing, and you can keep playing with other people. You can find good matches really easily with locals. Like, it's in a way better position than it would have been 6 years ago, 10 years ago, however long it's been with Street Fighter 4. So I totally get why people are excited. Like, I am a Mortal Kombat guy, for the most part, but hey, Street Fighter 6, it's definitely got its hooks in me. I think about it a lot.
Agree. Well, we've definitely talked about Street Fighter 6 a lot. I think we spent a total of like 45, like, so these absolute extras are supposed to be shorter than the average episode, and I think we spent 45 minutes talking about Parry. So next time we'll spend 45 minutes talking about Drive Rush.
Yeah, I could go 45 on Drive Rush. Trust me.
Yeah, I think we will. I think maybe we'll make this an ongoing series. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, so, no, it's great. I think that's the fun part of fighting games. You know, like when I had time in the pandemic to look at games and stuff, I started looking at them in a more game designy, intellectual. Why do I like these games? What synapses do they fire off at me? And fighting games are a huge one. Obviously, I had to interrogate, and I start to think a lot about these things and why they work. And I think that stuff is fascinating.
Cheers. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap the episode up here. You can find us on twitch.tv/Spiral Series, youtube.com/Spiral Series, and if you search on Spotify, we are under Absolute Guard. The Twitter handle is absolute_guard. Reach out to us if you guys have any suggestions for content. If you want to like hear a specific guest talk, if you want more of the Street Fighter 6 stuff, let us know. Thanks everyone, and thanks Tanner for being here. Until next time.
Yeah, of course. Toodaloo.
See ya.